Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Hellbent. Chapters 1 through 4, plus the prologue, as above. In these chapters, we find out that there is a whole bunch of status quo remaining, which doesn't really surprise anyone, probably. But the thing that I'm the most upset about is that apparently I was right about Alex's past sticking to her. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Joanna for commissioning this episode. I am so excited to be starting this book. I, of course, the day that I finished Ninth House, immediately downloaded and started listening to the next audiobook. And I'm going to start doing this thing that I probably should have been doing, but it's the sort of thing that you don't really begin to realize the necessity until it's happened a bunch of times and you're like dealing with the same question over and over. And that is, I'm going to start posting spreadsheets of the reading schedules for different things that I'm covering. So that means things I'm covering for Spoil Me, like this book, not Veiled Throne. I'm now on Speaking Bones for Dandelion Dynasty. But also Raybearer with Rashawn and the Sookie Stackhouse books with Miles. I forget how many people like to read along. And because I often don't decide until I am about to sit down and read myself what number of chapters I'm going to cover, it isn't something that I plan ahead and I can't tell people in advance. But I'm trying to be a little bit more consistent with not only planning things out on my end for shows that I'm doing with a co-host, but asking the person commissioning to give me a breakdown on how much they think I should cover per episode. Because a lot of times the people commissioning are aware of a break that might be better and stopping a little bit early one week versus another week. And I know that happened several times with things that Dan has commissioned for the Mage Errant series, things like that. So anyway, all that to say, Joanna, I really appreciate this. She sent me an email with the breakdown of what to read per episode. And I'm going to try and share that with y'all. I am not sure where I should put this information. My website is the sort of go-to thing, but nobody ever goes and checks that. So it feels to me like the obvious, but then it doesn't seem to be obvious to a lot of people. So I'll probably post it to the Facebook group and the Facebook page, pin it to the top, and also in the Discords for the no spoiler channels of each of the things. And that way it'll be a little bit easier for people to go and find. And just for your information, if you're listening and you're reading along, what I do is I try to screenshot a list of a breakdown, if I get one, from a commissioner, or if I make one in notes on my phone, I'll screenshot it and then heart the image and save it on my phone so that it's pretty easy to find it again. And that way I don't have to go searching for it every time I'm about to sit down and read. So anyway, that's just a little bit of business I want to get out of the way, and on with the book. So we start with part 1, as above. And this is sort of interesting to me because in the last book, we started with the seasons early spring, late spring, winter, autumn, summer, and last summer, I think, is the summer ones. This starts off with as above is the name of the prologue, and it just says November. And then when we start chapter 1, it says October 1 month before. So we're doing a similar time jumping around thing, but it's going to be organized more tightly. When we were dealing with seasons, that's a bigger expanse. And now we're only within a month, it seems like. And that is going to be a really different scenario. So what we've got going on at the start of this is Alex showing up at Black Elm, and she is struggling a little bit with a feeling as she goes in here of trepidation, because she goes to Black Elm, the way it's described here is that she and Dawes are at Black Elm not infrequently to sort of try and keep the place feeling alive. And Dawes does this mostly in the kitchen. And we have a description of, like, you know, things that she has left, the main thing being this vase full of holly. And there's the cat that they have to feed as well. So they're just sort of making the like this one area that they can handle feel a bit more lived in and alive. But it is rough going in the house overall. The boarded up windows on the second floor made it all so much worse. A wound in the wolf's side that left untended might turn it mad. And reminder that Dean Sandow in the last book basically seemed to lay not a curse on the place, but he banished Darlington. And I am really wondering if there's a way to undo that, because this place like is Darlington. And if Dean Sandow managed to take this place away from Darlington and attempted to murder him, that just feels too much. There's just a point at which, like, you know what I mean? Like, we all have our sort of lines in the sand where we're like, look, I can understand being vicious in XYZ way, but once you get vicious in 1, 2, 3 way, I have a really hard time forgiving that. And that is not to say that I really forgave Dean Sandow for what he was doing to Darlington in terms of feeding him to a fucking hell beast, because of course not. But the additional layer of then keeping him from his own home, it is so cruel. And I understand that when he did it, he didn't actually believe there was any reason that Darlington could come back, because everybody believed that Darlington's soul is completely gone. He got consumed by a hell beast. Nobody survives that. His soul isn't even remaining. So Dean Sandow, it was just kind of a precaution. It wasn't even with the intent of really accomplishing anything. It was just to cover his ass. But nevertheless, just, you know, God, man, kick him while he's down. So she steps inside. Despite the cold admission she'd come here to fulfill, the room still felt welcoming. Copper pans hung in neat rows above the big vintage stove, bright and ready, eager to be used. The slate floor was spotless, the counters wiped clean and set with a milk bottle full of holly branches that Dawes had arranged just so. The kitchen was the most functional room of Black Elm, alive with regular care, a tidy temple of light. This was how Dawes dealt with all they'd done, with the thing lurking in the ballroom. The what? I don't care for this at all. I am extremely worried that this is going to be something that they summoned while trying to get Darlington back, that either is only kind of Darlington in a way and something went wrong, or isn't Darlington at all because they like made a mistake or something got through. They opened like a little chink and something forced its way in that they weren't anticipating. Because the only reason that I think it isn't Darlington is because of the fact that Dean Sandow seemed to lay something down to keep him from coming back. But what Dean Sandow laid out to keep him from returning was like focused on his understanding of Darlington as a human being. And if Darlington isn't really, strictly speaking, human anymore, that ritual may not have accomplished what Sandow intended. So, you know, on the one hand, maybe the thing isn't Darlington because it can't be. On the other hand, maybe Sandow's thing didn't work, or it did work, and that's simply not the scenario we're dealing with anymore. But either way, this has become a routine, having to come to the house. And this leads me to assume that it's a result of the hound dog ritual, because in these opening chapters, Alex proposes doing that again, and Dawes reluctantly winds up agreeing. And I just have to think that's in the ballroom, because if they're going to do the hound dog ritual again, of course they're going to go to Black Elm to do it. That's what I would assume. I also want to mention here that it's interesting to me how Cosmo's name lines up with Galaxy. Like, there's a real theme there, and I would just like to know who named Cosmo. That's all I want to know. Just questions that I would like answered. That's all. And Cosmo is acting up and like tossing his food around because he's pissed at being left alone, or maybe frightened by not being alone anymore. And I had mentioned before, sort of wondering if there isn't anything going on with like Darlington being in Cosmo. I don't think really that's happening, but I'm not going to discount it entirely. I'm going to leave a little bit of a door open for that concept there. So let's see. She filled the water and food bowls, tossed out the junk mail, tucked a water bill into her bag, steps in a ritual performed with care, but they offered no protection. She considered making coffee. She could sit outside in the winter sunlight and wait for Cosmo to come find her when he saw fit to leave off prowling the messy tangle of the hedge maze for mice. She could do that, push her worry and anger aside, and try to solve this puzzle, even though she didn't want to complete the picture emerging with every new and nasty piece. And then she's like, no, I can't do that. I can't just go sit out there and act like things are cool and like contemplate the universe. So she's washing her hands and she turns to reach for a towel, and there is an open door there. And I love this. Alex dried her hands, trying to ignore the way her heart had leapt into a run. And there's a couple of moments in this opening that I think really resonate. First is the way that just this open door makes her completely panicked immediately, which is a very understandable reaction when you are in a place that you have gotten to know super well and just one thing is out of place. It's a combo of the fact that this door really shouldn't be left open, and she sort of talks herself into believing Dawes maybe left it open by accident, but like, Dawes is so careful about everything and would be extra careful in Darlington's house. She didn't leave it open. And also the fact Alex never even noticed that there was a door here before. And it turns out it is a real doorway. She pulls on a light, like a string that's hanging from the ceiling to turn on the bulb. And it's a regular staircase, and there's like cans of paint, and it's a clearly like leading to a regular old basement. But the fact that she never noticed it and now it's just open is super weird. And then there's this, and this made my fucking skin break out into goosebumps. First, she turns the light on, she sees this, she feels embarrassed that she was so flipped out when it's just a regular door, and she was like, is this another fucking hell beast mouth? And then she reached for the twine and paused there, hand gripping the string, listening. She thought she heard there again a soft hiss, the sound of her name. Galaxy. Fuck this. Correct. Fuck this, indeed. Holy Mary, Mother of God. I was listening to this out on a walk at night with my puppy, and I cannot tell you how it's a combo of the writing and the way the narrator for the audiobook delivered that line. The way that I did it just now is as close an approximation, but you get it. It's so fucking creepy. Oh my God. It's just creeped me out. I don't like anything hissing in the dark. I don't like a basement that you don't know is there and then all of a sudden it's open. And I don't like something knowing your name. Really, really don't like that. So she is about to say bye-bye, turns the bulb out, and feels somebody shove her between the shoulder blades. She had been carrying a knife. That just leaves her hand as she falls to the ground. And when she lands, she's like, oh, great. And it's also like there are pipes leaking down here because the floor is wet. And she stands up. Nobody comes at her. She's waiting for something to attack, and it doesn't happen. She pulls out her phone and turns the light on. And then there are two pairs of eyes, and she almost drops her phone. But it turns out they're not alive. It's two grays. And they are trembling in fear. Which, if you're dead and you're afraid anyway, that's a real situation. And then she looks down and realizes that the floor it's not a busted pipe. It's blood. And there are two bodies, and these grays are standing right next to their old bodies, which is a really weird thing. Grays don't normally just hang around their own body. So she asks who did this. The woman moans, and the man puts a finger to his lips and says, "We're not alone." And that's the end of the prologue. And I will tell you what, the prologue of the previous book, we know some shit went down. And she's in recovery mode. That's a very different energy than the way this starts out, where she is, we're in the middle of it. And I think it's a really smart move if we're going to do the in media res sort of thing and then kind of bookend this with time jumps and whatnot, doing it so that there's another major thing that's about to happen, like we're in the middle of it, instead of it having just happened and we're wondering when we'll find out what it was. I think this is a nice way to like keep up the energy that she established with the way she tells the story from the first book, but keeping the freshness of doing something a little bit different with it so that our interest is still there. Because I will be honest, initially realizing like we were doing the bookend thing again, a part of me was kind of like, oh man, I got very used to the last third of the past book going in order and just getting the story told in a sort of direct fashion. And that is not to say I don't think that the time jumps are handled well. I think it's they're done extraordinarily well. But when I can get kind of impatient, and knowing that I was going through a like simple telling, and now I'm going back to the author toying with me a little bit. Part of me just is like, just tell me what's going on. And no, she won't, because she is the boss and I just have to be here. And I guess that's the relationship we're going to have. So I am dying. I can't believe this is how she opened it. Just mean-spirited. So then we start chapter 1, October, 1 month before. And Alex, this is quite a fucking opening. Alex is here to be an enforcer and send a message basically to what's his face, I can't remember his name, but I'll find it again in a moment. I keep wanting to say Ariel, but he was the guy that she wound up killing. Yay. But she is going to come in and just threaten somebody who owes 12 grand, which I just truly can't imagine being in the position that these folks are in, that she has been in herself before, as we find out, of owing this kind of money to that kind of people. Like, just, I don't know how that happens. And I imagine that there are some perfectly good ways that can happen that are reasonable. But my anxiety just, of course, I would never get involved with people like this to begin with because of my anxiety. But let's say I had no choice and that was the way to stay alive. I don't know how I could, I don't know what I would do. I really don't. So we find out here that she is with her same roommates again this year. And this is such a sweet moment. Some a cappella group had been practicing in the courtyard when Alex was getting ready to leave the dorm. And it turns out that she had, like, first of all, missed Lauren and Mercy over the summer and hadn't really expected to miss them as much as she did. And then when she reunites with them, let's see, Alex had asked Lethe for a bike and a printer and a new tutor at the end of last year. They'd been happy to agree, and she wished she'd asked for more, which is a constant sort of refrain. And I really do appreciate the fact that, like, at this point, Alex is just not afraid to ask for help, ask for things, and she shouldn't be. This is the thing that happens when you're somebody who's used to being, you're of a population that is looked down on for needing help. You forget the fact that people who are oftentimes of means themselves are very entitled and expect things to be covered or handled for them in a way that isn't looked down upon, because since they do have the means, it's like, well, at least they're not dependent. This is just an expectation because of, and we can give any number of justifications why it's fine. It's a business expense, you know, things like this. And really, we should get over it and accept the help and not have this weird streak of pride about it, especially considering, as she puts it, who else bled for this place? You know, she's talking about Lethe and Ilbastone and the way that everything went down. They owe her, and they fucking do. So let's see. Watching Mercy hang a garland of stars over the fireplace in their new common room, quite a change from their cramped rooms on old campus. The couch and recliner had made it to their new suite, the coffee table they'd all assembled together at the start of freshman year, the toaster and its seemingly inexhaustible supply of Pop-Tarts sent courtesy of Lauren's mom. And I really like that too. Just the detail of, like, somebody's mom just sending them stuff, that is a very real thing. And honestly, Pop-Tarts just don't get old. They just don't. Their freshman dorm on old campus had been the most beautiful place Alex had ever lived, but the residential college, J.E. proper, felt real, solid, and elegant, permanent. She liked the stained glass windows, the stonework faces in every corner of the courtyard, the scuffed wood floors, the heavily carved fireplace that didn't work, but they decorated with candles and a vintage globe. She even liked the little gray in an old-fashioned dress, a child with hair done up in crisp curls who liked to linger in the branches above the tree swing. Which, I'm sure that's very charming, but absolutely fucking not. No. And she is sharing a room with Mercy. There's only two, and Alex got the single, or no, Lauren got the single. And she's like, I'm pretty sure Lauren cheated, but I don't really care. It's fine. There's something reassuring about having Mercy in the room with me. And as somebody who kind of felt like they got cheated into having to share a room, can't relate. Eitan, that's his name. So she gets a text from him, and evidently, I don't know what it is that he's holding over her, because she had told him that she was the one who killed everybody, but he didn't believe her, you know, and there's no proof that she did. And if he went to the police with that, first of all, he wouldn't go to the police for shit. But secondly, nobody would believe him, even if he did. So what is it that he has over her? That, is it her mom? Is that it? Like, I don't know. And let's see. Alex made sure the sidewalk was clear of possible witnesses, and she drew a mirrored compact from the pocket of her jeans. When she hadn't been mapping New Haven's infinite churches for Dawes, she'd spent the summer digging through the drawers of Ilbastone's armory. And she's, like, looking for some things in this, sort of, on the one hand, just researching, but also kind of feeling close to Darlington by doing it. And there's a sense of accusation from the thoughts she has about Darlington now, as if he's, like, in her face going, where are you? Why haven't you come for me yet? So she uses this compact to take a face off of the television, which she wasn't sure would work, and I wouldn't have been sure either. And I think later we find out that it's Brett Favre, who is a piece of shit, by the way, just FYI. But she's going to this dude's house, and he sees her at the height of Brett Favre, so he's like talking to her a foot above her head. And this dude is at first kind of nonplussed, and then assumes she's there to score some drugs. That's the only explanation for somebody who's like a celebrity being at his door. And it's funny because she chooses to say UO 12 large, but she says it in her own voice, which kind of fucks the illusion up and causes it to waver for a second. Now he saw her as she was, a tiny girl standing in his living room. Oh, it's Tom Brady, not Brett Favre. My bad. Black hair parted in the middle, so skinny she might slip straight through the floorboards. And he is coming at her, and she shoots her arm out and pulls this dude from the sidewalk in front of the house into herself, and uses his strength to send this guy flying across the room. She may have even like broken his sternum. And she gets in his face, and he starts to make excuses, and she's like, look, it doesn't matter. I have my job, and if you don't pay up, I'm going to have to come back and do things to you. And I really don't want to do it. Just give him the money. And all of a sudden, her head hurts, and she feels this taste of candy like Jolly Rancher in her mouth. Shit, man, you look bad. It took Alex a second to realize she was the one speaking with someone else's voice. Oddman's eyes widened. Derek? Yeah. Yeah, I went to your wake. Alex stood, nearly losing her footing. She caught a glimpse of herself in the reflection from the broken TV, but the person looking back at her wasn't a scrawny girl in a tank top and jeans. It was a boy in a beanie and a parka, who I definitely pictured Badger from Breaking Bad, just for a visual if anybody needs one. She shoved the gray out of her. For a moment they stared at each other. She didn't know what had killed him, and she didn't want to know. He'd somehow pushed to the forefront of her consciousness, taken over her face and her voice, and she wanted none of that. And that is a truly frightening moment. Her considering what it could be that the exchange of power here. She had opened herself up to the Greys in order to be rescued from Daisy. And now she can hear them, which is certainly one of the payoffs, or not payoffs, that's the wrong word, prices. That's really the price, is having to also hear them. But it appears that there is another price she's paying, and opening herself up to them the way that she has is creating a stronger link. Like, this isn't even North that's doing this. North, whose names she's said and whose, life she has seen in turn, and this connection that they have, if he were able to do this, it would be a little different. It would be a little bit more expected. But this is a complete and utter stranger. And that he was capable of this is really... I'm wondering if it's partially the fact that she used a Grey against someone that Grey used to know in life. And if that had anything to do with it. I don't know. And I really enjoy when she's trying to head home and she's thinking how sweaty she is and that she wished she wore shorts. But it didn't feel right to wear cutoffs to a beatdown, which that line actually made me laugh out loud. I get it. That really does kind of seem weirdly inappropriate. So I love this moment a lot here. Alex didn't slow down until she'd passed the new colleges and crossed Trumbull. It was comforting to be back near campus where the trees grew over the streets and shady canopies. How had she become someone who felt more at home here than on the streets outside the Taurus? Comfort was the drug she hadn't understood until it was too late and she was hooked on cups of tea and book-lined shelves, nights uninterrupted by the wail of sirens and the ceaseless churning of helicopters overhead. I think about this all the time. And this is something that I think is fundamental to why rich people are so disconnected. There is something about the improvement of our circumstances that can cause us to totally lose touch with where we used to be. And it's not even necessarily that we forget that's how we used to live, so much as that we have been trying so hard to escape living that way that once we do, we view it with a kind of contempt that doesn't have a lot of compassion in it anymore sometimes. Or there's a compassion, but it's also a feeling of like such relief that it eclipses the compassion. And you're just, thank God I'm not in that anymore. I have that a lot when thinking about how broke I was when I first started podcasting full time. I remember, and I've talked about this before, thinking about what an unbelievable luxury it would be if I could not only always afford to get a book on Kindle, because I was so poor, you guys, I couldn't even afford the $8 to buy the Kindle copy of things. I would have to pirate the book and read it from a PDF for a lot of my recordings. But not only how luxurious it would be to just be able to buy something on Kindle, but also be able to afford the matching audiobook so that I could switch from Kindle to audiobook and get through an entire book reading or listening as I felt like doing. And that is the standard for me now. I get the audiobook and the Kindle version immediately of whatever I'm covering every time now. And that felt so laughably out of reach only like 5 years ago that I think I even said on some recording, even if I could afford it, I wouldn't waste my money like that. I really never thought it would be a possibility. And even if it were, I thought it would be irresponsible. And now I'm doing it, and I have an accountant, so I know I can write it off. And just everything about like how I live in that way has shifted, and I genuinely forget. So I've gotten some like nasty reviews on Dresden Files from people who found out that I was pirating the book. I'll tell you what, as soon as I could afford to buy them, I was buying them because it was so much more convenient. I didn't want to be reading the PDF. That was not convenient for me as somebody covering the material. And it wasn't convenient having to jump from like phone to desktop and whatnot. But I forget sometimes how tight my budget was that $8 truly was out of the question. There was simply no way. And I forget sometimes that other people are just living like that still. You know, I left that behind. And so in some ways, a part of me feels like everybody is doing better now along with me. It's this weird, like, disconnect between my experience and the experiences of everyone around me. And so I just fucking forget that, yeah, $8 may not seem like much to me now, but there are people who are still in the situation that I was 5 years ago. And I'm not in that situation basically at the whims of my patrons. I have enough people supporting me that I can do this now. And at any moment, something could happen and that will be gone. As is with anybody who has a job, because if you are in the United States, we can be fired for anything. There's like really no protections. So all of us sort of are on this tightrope in this way. But anyway, I just appreciated this like acknowledgement of how easy it is to get comfortable and lose sight of what your life used to be like. And suddenly you return to something that reminds you of where you were, and you are so uncomfortable and surprised at the fact that you're uncomfortable. So this is when she's thinking about like how the Gray did what he did. And she texts Eitan, tells him it's done. He just texts back, when I have my money. And then she calls Dawes, who had sent her a text, urgent call in. And it turns out they've selected a new praetor. I think that's how you say it. And it turns out that this is going to be this is not somebody that they know yet. Dawes didn't ask. They're certain, I'm pretty sure, that it is a dude. But the Praetor had been Dean Sandow, so they have to be replaced. And Alex and Dawes had both been sort of banking on the fact that it would take them so long to replace a Praetor because they have to meet certain requirements that they'd be able to do what they need doing to summon back Darlington. Well, I say summon back. We're going to hell, or that's allegedly the whole thing. But they had thought they would have time to do what needed doing before a Praetor was going to be like nosing around and getting in their business. And it looks like that's not going to happen after all. And when she says, Dawes tells her Anselm wants to set up a meeting, maybe a tea on Saturday, Alex says, I need more than a couple of days to prepare. Egyptian, Mayan, Hebrew, Chinese, Arabic, engravings of cave paintings from Les Comborales. They covered all their bases. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is her thinking about Darlington. Sorry, you guys know how this, like, in her head, she'll be thinking about something from the past while she's talking to Dawes. So I'm getting like, I was reading that, like, this doesn't feel like something that she said to Dawes. And indeed, it's not. This is Darlington telling her about something that is like engraved on the Sterling Library, and apparently some of it was like Mayan and they hadn't gotten it translated, so it was just like they picked words at random just because they look impressive and cool. We need a delay. I went to First Presbyterian. There's nothing as far as I can tell. I'll send you the photos. And we find out that Michelle Alameddine told them they have to complete certain steps in order for a gateway to hell to open up. You take your first steps into the labyrinth, and only then does the path become clear. There will be signs and symbols, or at least that's one theory. That's all hell and the afterlife are, theories, because the people who get to see the other side don't come back to tell about it, which is pretty much what was said in the previous book. There are rumors of a gauntlet on Station Island. There might have been one in the Imperial Library of Constantinople before it was destroyed. And according to Darlington, a bunch of society boys built one right here. And this, like, gauntlet thing, I don't feel like we get much of a description of what this is yet, but we're probably going to get more of an in-depth explanation later, so I'm not going to worry about it. He said some society members had done it on a dare and that he intended to find it. I told him he was an idiot and that he should spend more time worrying about his future and less time digging into Lethe's past. Darlington loved Lethe, but he also would have wanted to listen to his Virgil. He took that seriously. And I really appreciate that moment where she's like, yeah, he took me seriously. And Dawes says yes in a very sort of heartfelt way. Like this was something that meant a lot to her as well. And it never really occurred to me how much that might mean to some people if they haven't been taken seriously. But treating their opinion like they are meaningful and that they have the actual know-how and expertise to be worth listening to, it makes sense that that would make you feel like somebody is really listening, you know? I just like that little detail. So her and Dawes had been meeting to try and like figure things out, and they invite Michelle, but she had only ever like taken them up on it one time, and then otherwise Michelle has avoided it, and she's kind of afraid to help them. And Alex isn't mad at her for that. There's just this whole like everything is so nebulous. They don't know anything for sure. 2 weeks after Michelle's visit, Alex and Dawes had gotten their big break, a single lonely paragraph in a Lethe Days diary from 1938. And we don't find out what that is yet. But anyway, she heads to this ritual Book and Snake is doing. This is so wild. So I'm going to just sum this up. What they're doing is they are bringing in an operative who was murdered, and they are raising him from the dead and using him as a planchette on a giant room-sized Ouija board. asking him questions and having to slowly spell out the answers, because that's the way they communicate with the dead. They can't just like get him to talk to them. That's not how it works. And it's so, I really appreciate the way this is described, as she's looking at this, like thinking about how when somebody imagines using the dead to communicate and find out things, this sort of obscenity, the way this body is used, wouldn't occur to most people. They would picture something that has more dignity and a sort of somber quality that is what goes along with that sort of vibe is respect. But that isn't the energy of this at all. And when I say that it's like walking around touching letters and they have to spell it out, I don't mean just walking. I'm just going to read this because I hate this so much. So first of all, there's the fact that they knew this guy was going to die. And she's like, yeah, he was definitely murdered. I don't know if they killed him or if they just knew he was going to die, but one of those things is true. And this, I hate this so much. One of the stone snakes began to move, its white scales iridescent in the firelight. It slithered toward the corpse undulating across the marble floor, then paused as if scenting the body. Alex choked back a gasp when it lunged, jaws wide, and latched onto the corpse's calf. The corpse began to twitch, muscles spasming, bouncing off the iron floor like hot kernels in a pan. The snake released its grip, and Yashevsky's body sprang into a deep crouch, feet wide, hands cupping its knees, waddling like a crab, but with a speed that made Alex's skin crawl. His face was stretched into a grimace, eyes wide and panicked, mouth pulling down like a theatrical mask of tragedy. I really cannot emphasize enough how excellent this scene is for making all of this so unsettling. This is just so obscene. Like, that's really the only word, you know? A string of drool hung from Jacob Yashevsky's mouth as he waited in that deep, unnatural crouch, rocking slowly from side to side, toes wiggling slightly, eyes rolling in his head, a gargoyle. And the general asks him questions. Who was your primary contact at the FSB? Yashevsky's body crab-walked left, right, left with that unnerving speed. Alex had done some research into golems and glume that year, but she had no idea how she'd fight that thing if it came running at her. And eventually, I love this moment so much. This was why Greys steered clear of Book and Snake. Not because their tomb looked like a mausoleum, but because the dead weren't meant to be treated this way. Alex considered the veiled and bowed heads of the letterman, the scribe. You're right to hide your faces, she thought. When your time comes, someone's going to be waiting for payback on the other side. And I really, really appreciate the acknowledgement of, like, you know, when North was on the other side, the people that Alex killed could smell her magic on him and knew she was the one involved. So even if their faces are covered, it's possible something is going to be able to tell. And she's thinking about Yashevsky's consciousness, and if it goes back, is it going to be whole, or will it be damaged by what they did, bringing it here? And that hadn't occurred to me, and that is a really upsetting thought. That, like, by summoning the dead, you're breaking them somehow. Because you're forcing them into a body that's not even alive anymore. And they're not meant to be in a body anymore. And just, like, the whole thing, you know? It was very sad. There was something about it that's just very, very sad. So at the end of this, they finish taking their information from him and writing it down, but the corpse is still walking around. And Alex is like, what is he spelling out? And the girl she's like talking to, the contact, says something about mother's milk or the Milky Way. But the high priest says, it doesn't mean anything. It's just a glitch. It happens. It's worse when the corpse isn't fresh. But this is what winds up making things come together a little bit later. Alex goes back to the hutch and Dawes is there waiting for her. And she is just kind of trying to recover from the freakiness of this. And her and Dawes discuss what they're going to do. What if we say fuck the gauntlet and try Sandow's hound dog casting instead? That didn't go very well last time. No, it hadn't. They'd almost been eaten by a hellbeast for their trouble. But Sandow wasn't really trying, was he? Alex said. He thought Darlington was gone forever, that there was no way he could survive a trip to hell. He thought the casting would just prove Darlington was dead. She almost thought she imagined it when she heard a faint, okay. What? Okay. What do you mean, okay? Do you know what the Greeks call the Milky Way? You know I don't. Galaxius. Alex sat down on the edge of the couch, trying to ignore the sliver of cold in her gut. He was trying to reach you, said Dawes. To reach us. You don't know that. There's something we could try. I have an idea. But if the Lethe board finds out, I can't lose this job, and neither can you. Do we go back to Black Elm? No, we need the table at Scroll and Key. We need to open a portal. To hell. I can't think of anything else. Good. Then we open a portal. How do we get into Scroll and Key? I'll get us in. Dawes chewed on her lower lip. I'm not going to hit anyone, Dawes. Dawes tugged at a strand of her hair. Or threaten anyone. I'm going to be real polite. And she means it. You know, she's been given kind of a second chance here. Sandow was able to give her that grade bump to get her through before he died. And she's just like, I want things to go back to normal. She isn't intending to go scorched earth here, you know? So the last chapter in this section, she would have stayed in New Haven for the summer if not for Eitan. Alex told her mother she'd gotten a job on campus, and that was enough for Mira. She thought Los Angeles was a temptation for Alex, that she'd step off a plane and fall back into her old life with her old friends. There was no chance of that, but they're all dead, Mama, wasn't going to put Mira's mind at ease. And the truth was, Alex didn't want to go home. And I really do, guys, I love my mom so much, but this next thing fucking slammed me in the gut because I felt it so hard. She didn't want to hear about her mother's latest obsession, gemstone massage, aura cleansing, essential oils, an endless hunt for easy miracles. Yo. I love my mom so much, and there is so much that I believe in as well as her. Like, you know, it's not like every time she tells me anything, I'm over here with my skeptic face on. But this endless hunt for easy miracles, that was the part that really killed me. My mother has always wanted an easy way out. She's never gotten it, but she's under this impression that other people have gotten it, and it's simply being denied to her. And so it's not that she has never gotten it because it doesn't exist. She's never gotten it because for some reason it's been kept from her, but it's there if she can just find her way to it. And this causes a simultaneous, constant, weird hopefulness, and also this deep resentment towards anyone who's doing well in their lives. And I can't lie, that has affected me in a big way. I have noticed that in myself, especially like when things really hit the fan for me with my marriage to Brendan. That was when I started to like pull away from my old life and look at the way I felt about certain things and my reaction to stuff, and began to spot patterns in how the like resentment would show up for me. And I finally began to pinpoint. I had this like vague fairy tale expectation as well. And I've watched my mother go through that, and there's always a new thing. You know, she's on these like Facebook groups and she watches these YouTube channels, and there's always some wild, it's not even like a fad exactly. It's just something else that gets her hopes up, that if I can do this, it'll just turn the corner for me. And all of a sudden my life will fall into place. And it's very tiring, and I don't want to be discouraging to her, because what harm does it do for her to like look for something good in her life? But also it feels like a crutch. It feels like it's holding her back. And so I don't want to encourage it either, because I don't believe in a lot of it the way that she believes in it. So I don't feel like I can sustain a conversation and not have the contempt like leak into it. There's just, I don't know. There's a lot about the way that Alex feels toward her mother that I also feel towards mine. And that is not to say that I have experienced the like specific kind of trauma that Alex has. I actually really enjoy too the fact that her mother cares about her, obviously, and really had tried a lot of things to keep her from going down the path she was so determined to go down. So it's not as if she were a neglected kid. But there is just, Alex has like done some growing that her mother hasn't. And I feel this way about my own mother a lot, that she feels stunted somehow to me a lot of the time. And I wish that she could like break past it, because I feel like there's so much potential for her if she were to embrace what is, instead of constantly looking towards what she imagines could be. But at the same time, who the fuck am I? You know, like, it's a tough thing. And this, every time she talks about her mother, I just have this feeling of like, Lee Bardugo, do you have this with your mom? Like, where are you getting this? Who have you talked to? Is this your personal experience, or is this like a friend of yours that has had this? Or where are you getting the characterization? Because it's just so spot on to me. And I'm just sort of fascinated by it. So anyway, it turns out that Alex doesn't need a job over the summer. Lethe gives her like a stipend. And so she just basically sets up house in Il Bastone and stays there all summer. And she reads tons of books because she kind of wants to just disconnect from the rest of the world. And she even makes like a nest to sleep in Hiram's crucible. Only the armory was climate controlled to protect the artifacts. So when the weather got too hot, she took a heap of blankets and pillows from the Dante bedroom and made a nest for herself at the bottom of Hiram's crucible. The whole concept here of sleeping in that thing. And she has these dreams when she sleeps there. And I'm like, yeah, I bet you do. That thing is magic as hell. And you are very magic also, clearly. She dreamed of a mountaintop covered in green, passages that smelled of damp stone. She'd been there before, knew her way up the staircases. There was a room with 3 windows and a round basin in which to watch the stars. She saw her own face reflected in the water, but when she woke, she knew she'd never been to Peru, only seen it in books. And I'm like, maybe. Or maybe there's a gray that's been and is somehow accessing you while you're in the crucible, or you're connecting to somebody else with your abilities when you're in the crucible. I don't know. But anyway, she gets a call, and it's Eitan. We need to have conversation. You understand? No. I don't want to discuss on the phone. You come see me at the house. I'm not going up to Mulholland. I don't have a car. Your mother has car. Old Jetta, not reliable. Shlomo watches your house for so long, but only your mama comes and goes, never you. Where are you, Alex? Right now? Crashing with friends in Topanga Canyon. I'll come this weekend. Not Saturday. Come tomorrow. Friday before 5. I've got work. I can come Sunday. Good girl. So she is assuming this man is planning to kill her. She's trying to figure out what she's going to do, but he mentioned her mother for a reason. You know, he is using leverage, and she can't just ignore this. So she is sitting there trying to figure out what to do. And the whole energy is that she just doesn't want to go back to the world that she left. She's here in Il Bastones. She's kind of setting things up for herself and has enough security that it's like safe finally. And now she has to re-enter that world. Like, it's not fair, frankly. Did he have unfinished business with Len that had been put on hold for a year? Or did he somehow know what Alex had done? How had he connected her to his cousin's death? And I'm like, you told him and he didn't believe you, and there's no reason for him to believe you. And I was assuming that she had already paid him back that $6,000 he said she owed because she got it from Lethe. And I think she did. I don't think this has to do with that. So she calls the Lethe board member about getting help with the fair to go see her mother. And they take care of it. And let's see, Anselm's assistant arranged for a car to the airport and the return flight. So I guess they're only paying the return flight. They're not paying for the flight out, which I was just kind of like, just pay for the whole thing, guys. But I guess that's fine. She packed underwear and a toothbrush in her backpack and made a stop in the armory, but then realized she had no idea what to bring in with her. She felt like she was walking into a trap, but Lethe didn't traffic in the kinds of objects that could stop men like Eitan. At least not anything she could bring on a plane. I'll be back, she murmured to the house as the front door locked behind her. She paused to listen to the soft whining of the jackals beneath the porch, and she hoped it was true. Alex had made good on that promise. She'd even finished that Ray Bradbury paperback. She just hadn't known she would return with fresh blood on her hands. Oh boy. I honestly cannot fucking wait to find out what this is. And there's a little afterword here in the chapter. The coat of many foxes. Believed to be the work of Alaric Forstner, who was subsequently burned at the stake for his decimation of the local fox population. The coat changed hands multiple times, and there are records that indicate it belonged to an Oxford Don around the same time C.S. Lewis was teaching there, but this has never been fully substantiated. There is speculation that at one time hanging the coat in a closet, armoire, or wardrobe would create a portal, but whatever magic the coat may or may not have possessed is long gone. Yet another example of the instability of portal magic. See Tiara for a rare exception. And I'm like, Tiara, noted. I don't know if that's going to be relevant at all, but I feel like it will. So just putting a little pin in that in my brain because I don't know, you know? But can I just say how effective the writing must be if I have the same sick feeling in my stomach at the fact that Alex has to go back to LA that she probably would have at finding out she has to go back as well. Like, I just can't tell you guys how worried I am about her. And I know it's going to be okay, question mark, like as okay as it's going to get. But I had really hoped for her sake that she would be able to leave all of it behind her. And I ought to have known that probably wasn't going to be how it went. But I was hoping, you know, I really feel for her desire for stability and safety. And I mean, you guys know how I react. I think I've talked about this on other stuff as well. There is this trope that happens in a lot of books, not just like fantasy necessarily, but that there will be a particular place that is the safe place in the story, whether it's somebody's shop, somebody's home, an apartment, a school, or a particular classroom in a school. All kinds of books have different sort of headquarters when there is a bigger cast of characters. And there is a trope that when things get bad, that safe place is no longer safe. Something happens to it, somebody destroys it, somebody breaks into it, and all of a sudden they're not able to find solitude or safety there anymore. And this has long been, personally, one of my least favorite tropes, not because it's problematic or anything, but because I crave that feeling of safety and stability myself. As somebody who grew up without a lot and just struggled so much for so much of my life, as so many other people have, I never was homeless or anything, you know. It certainly could have been worse, but there was still always that sense of like, yeah, but I'm right on the edge, and if anything goes particularly wrong, I will be, you know, like. So as somebody who lives in that place of wanting it in my fantasy literature, or not but like when I'm reading fiction, I appreciate getting to have a sense of safety and stability in those stories. I always had difficulty when, even in the story, it gets taken away. So with Alex and how much it means to her as a character, because usually stories like this, my reaction to these safe places is like out of proportion even to what the main character feels about the place. But I really hoped that that was it. And going back, I feel like my own anxiety coming to the surface in addition to what I feel for Alex, because that was just such a dark chapter for her. And I have no idea what he wants to see her about. All I can think is that the guy who she went and like roughed up said something to Eitan. I'm wondering if maybe she was a little too effective and it has caught his attention, and now he wants to put her to more use somehow. That's the only thing I can think, because I don't think she's in trouble the way she believes she's in trouble. But I have a feeling if she was able to get this guy to pay up right away, if Eitan's having trouble with somebody else closer to home, he could summon her to deal with it. I also am curious because he sends her to get this guy to pay up. Is this like the timing of this? Let me look again. Chapter 4 is last summer. Okay. So last summer was when she was asked to do this. So roughing this guy up. Okay. So I'm sorry, guys, the way that the story is told, I'm losing track of when things happen. So roughing the guy up is one of the things she was sent to do. So that has already happened. Okay. I'm getting mixed up. So what we're about to see is whatever it is he's holding over her. And considering she says she made good on it, but she had blood on her hands, like something, she had to do something. And that, I guess, is what he's holding over her. She had to kill again. I don't know. Oh man, I hate all this. I hate it. She's going to have to kill Eitan. That's like all that it comes down to. That's the only way to deal with something like this. And even then, who does he work for? Are they going to track her down? Like, she's in it, you know? I don't know how you get out. Ugh. Anyway, okay. I got to wrap up. But thank you again, Joanna, for commissioning this. Appreciate you a lot. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
Unspoiled Network podcast.